Alex. I always knew that I would have one child and that that child would be a son, so it was no surprise when I discovered that I was pregnant at the age of 39. The day I became aware of my pregnancy, I went out into the huge forest behind where we used to live in Norway to commune with nature, and as I was sitting on a rocky outcrop overlooking the extensive marshy area not far from our home, I had a transcendental experience. Once again, the nature of reality shifted, and the whole forest and marsh took on an otherworldly vibrancy. I could feel the presence of my guides, and that of many other spiritual beings besides, as the soul that was incarnating as Alex entered my body. I can only think that some of them were Alex's own guides. There was a sort of telepathic exchange of messages, confirming a pre-birth karmic agreement that we had entered into on the astral plane even before I was born. This was one of the certainties of my own life, part of the framework which we determine for our lives in advance, but within which we have complete free will to operate. It was the most beautiful, harmonious feeling, accompanied by a golden light, and the certainty that the souls of Alex and myself are inextricably linked, that we have known each other throughout eternity, that we would support and love each other in our current lives, and that we would continue to work together on the astral plane once our lives were over. My memories of Alex's birth. During the weeks prior to your birth, the weather was very hot, almost Mediterranean-like. On the day you were born, it was beautiful in the morning, followed by a violent thunderstorm in the afternoon. Your birth was extremely traumatic, although it started off well enough. I noticed the first contractions around 5 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturday the 21st of May. But to start with, I thought the mild stomach cramps I was experiencing were due to something I'd eaten. However, they became more frequent and increased in intensity during the evening, and by about 3 o'clock on the Sunday morning, I decided you were definitely on the way. So we rang the hospital and they said we should come in. We took a taxi into Oslo, and on arrival at the hospital, I was examined by a midwife who ascertained that I was 1 centimetre dilated. After that, things proceeded to get worse, and I was having strong, regular, frequent contractions throughout the whole of Sunday without anything much happening. It took until 6 o'clock on the Monday morning for me to reach full dilation, and by that time I had been given loads of painkillers, pethidine, gas and air, sterile water capsules, and an epidural, as well as a drip to promote the contractions. The midwives who attended us, 5 in all, monitored your state of health at regular intervals, and you were holding your own very well. At 6 o'clock that Monday morning, it finally looked as though everything was going to be okay, and you started to move down the birth passage, but you got stuck. By that time, I was totally exhausted, and you were showing signs of distress. After much deliberation on the part of the doctors and midwife, we were taken to the operating theatre, where they first tried to deliver you using forceps, but when that didn't work, they performed an emergency caesarean. I was fully conscious during the operation. They boosted the epidural, and I remember well the moment you were born. The doctor standing by my head was trying to explain what they were doing in the most dreadful Norwegian. I think he was English. and I tried to tell him that he could speak English, but I was completely unable to talk, so I had to suffer listening to him. As they pulled you out, he said, "I can see a hand and an arm, and yes, it's a boy." Immediately afterwards, you started to cry, and I remember feeling intense joy and relief because you were all right. I was allowed a brief glimpse of you. You were all covered in blood, but looked lovely, before they rushed you into the children's ward to monitor your progress, because you had inhaled some of the amniotic fluid during the birth. After that, I started shaking uncontrollably for about half an hour, but then it subsided. I think it was a shock reaction. I didn't see you again until the next day, but after the operation, Daddy came to see me and showed me the Polaroid photos they had taken of you in your incubator and told me you were beautiful and doing just fine. But right from the very moment of your birth, I had had an intuitive feeling that you were okay, so I wasn't worried about you. You stayed in the children's ward for several days after your birth because you had jaundice and needed light treatment. I was so exhausted after the birth and operation that I wasn't in a fit state to look after you in any way. When Daddy came to visit me the next morning, he took me across to see you in a wheelchair. You looked lovely where you were lying there in your incubator, and the nurse took you out and gave you to me so that I could feed you. You latched onto the breast immediately without any hesitation, and I remember feeling very proud of you and amazed at how clever you were. Since you had to stay in the incubator for much of the time during the first few days after your birth, I was unable to feed you regularly, so the nurses fed you from a bottle to supplement my milk. But once they allowed you back to the maternity ward, I started feeding you all the time on demand. I was in a daze for much of that week while we were in the hospital and suffered dreadful after effects from the birth and operation, but I also felt euphoric at the same time and so happy with my beautiful miracle baby. Daddy and I were so terribly proud of you and thought that you were the most wonderful baby in the world. Further confirmation of the close relationship that exists between Alex and myself was received when I visited a Norwegian healer when Alex was 4 years old. As explained in the chapter entitled Depression, I suffered from severe anxiety and clinical depression after Alex was born, and although I was quite a bit better by the time of this visit, I was still struggling. A neighbour had told me about an amazing healer who lived on a farm way out in the forest, about 40 miles away from where we lived, so I rang him up and arranged to visit him. The journey to his farm involved a bus ride and a long walk, because we didn't have a car in those days, and Alex's dad came along too. When we arrived, the healer took me into his healing room while Alex and his dad waited outside. He placed his hands on me, and immediately I felt the most indescribable, beautiful heat spread throughout my whole body. He told me that I had had a cesarean and a lot of things about myself and my life that he could not possibly have known. After the session was over, we went outside, and he told me that Alex and I had a special sort of energy, but that his dad was not like us. He said that Alex had his own special mission in life, which would become apparent when he was older, when the time was right, but that first he needed to live a normal life without being sidetracked by esoteric matters. Alex does indeed possess special abilities, and these have always lurked in the wings while he was growing up and leading a normal life, which included the full range of boyhood fun, travel and adventure. Being a Gemini, he has always been a social person and has a wide circle of friends, but also a hard core of good close friends. At school he was highly versatile and did well in all subjects, both academic and otherwise. He was good at all sports and played football for a local team. He played the piano, clarinet and drums. He was a member of the local Cubs and Scouts group. He achieved bronze and silver Duke of Edinburgh awards. However, as he has grown older, his artistic side has become more prominent and he has developed a keen interest in travel and photography. The following account about Alex's imaginary friend Dilly is one example of his latent contact with the hidden realms. Dilly. Dilly first appeared in March 1997 when Alex was 3 years old. Dilly is Alex's special friend, a crocodile who doesn't like Mummy and Daddy, only Alex. He comes to see Alex at night when no one else can see him and tells Alex all sorts of interesting and helpful things. For example, he told Alex that Mummy and Daddy had bought an Easter egg for him the night before he was given it on Easter Sunday. Sometimes there's not just one Dilly, but a whole load of them. Dilly lives a long way away, and his address is Norway Sport. Every day, almost, Alex tells us another snippet about Dilly, his life, what he does, thinks and says, etc. He was quite upset after he had been to his childminder Vivi's one day in June, because she had told him that Dilly was dum, which is the Norwegian word for silly, and a dream in his head. Alex was most insistent that Dilly was not a dream. I told him that Vivi didn't understand about Dilly because she wasn't able to see him like Alex could. One day Alex surprised me by saying, "Dilly eats something make him fly. Det er farlig," which is Norwegian for it's dangerous, for Mummy, Daddy and Alex, but not Dilly. The following day, Dilly told Alex there were no thieves where we lived in Ski. He was quite insistent about this. About a week after Dilly started flying, Dilly gave Alex some of the special stuff to eat, and Alex started flying with Dilly too. At first it was just to the playground, but soon they ventured further afield, all round the world and also out into space. About this time, various other invisible friends emerged with amazing names such as Mayonnaise Krunk, who was like Dilly but a female version. However, Dilly remained the dominant friend. Alex told me that Dilly could help people who were dead by putting some special cream in them. The first time he mentioned this was when he saw his grandmother and aunt looking at his great-uncle's grave in the churchyard, but he referred to it on subsequent occasions in connection with other deaths, for example that of Princess Diana. About the time Alex was 5, he stopped talking about Dilly. When I asked him if he had seen Dilly recently, he said that Dilly was behind a thunderstorm and was having difficulty in getting through. Later on, he said that he missed Dilly. He was 5.5 then. This is a picture of Dilly which Alex drew one day when I asked him what Dilly looked like. Like Alex, many children have imaginary friends who eventually disappear as the child grows older and life starts to become more complicated. I believe that these so-called imaginary friends are the child's guides or guardian angels on the astral plane, and that some children are still able to communicate with them for a while after birth. Alex was brought up as a bilingual child, speaking both English and Norwegian, so his speech developed slightly later than is normal for children only learning one language. Consequently, we did not start hearing about Dilly until Alex was able to express his thoughts in words. Alex's descriptions of Dilly and their shared experiences were obviously coloured by his environment and his linguistic abilities, but I believe very strongly that he was describing a very real phenomenon, only visible to himself. In Alex's case, Dilly started to fade away into the depths of Alex's consciousness, behind the thunderstorm, as he became older and his spirit became more firmly anchored in his physical body. The references to flying with Dilly most probably relate to astral travel, something which I have experienced myself on many occasions, either in dreams or in a semi-conscious or meditative state. On the astral plane, we are not bound by our physical body, and flying is probably the best way of explaining how we travel and move around there. Deep energy healing also takes place on the astral plane, and that could explain why Alex thought Dilly could heal people or even help them when they were dead. Alex also had many adventures with his teddy bear, Bomser, as revealed in the following account written in Bomser's own words. Bomser's story. Grandma gave me to Alex's mum as a present several years before Alex was born. When Alex was about 20 months old, he started to show great interest in me, and we soon became inseparable companions. I went everywhere with Alex, day and night, and he refused to go to sleep unless I was with him. He called me Bomser, the Norwegian word for teddy bear. We had so many adventures together, and I got lost on many occasions. Several times Alex threw me out of his pram in the street without Mummy noticing, and I was rescued by friendly passers-by and returned to my rightful owner. Once I was left at my aunt's home, and Mummy had to travel a long way to get me back. Another time, when Mummy was doing her translator's exam in Bergen, Alex left me in the first hotel we stayed at. When we arrived at the new hotel, they couldn't find me, but eventually discovered that I was at the first hotel, so they had to return to get me. My worst experience was when Alex and Mummy took the train to visit some friends who lived on the other side of Oslo in November 1996, and Alex left me on the train. Mummy did her best to find me and checked with all the stations and lost property offices, but no one had seen me. It was not until the following February, when I had given up all hope of being found, that Alex's dad checked the lost property office at the main line station in Oslo again on an off chance, and found me on the shelf where I had been languishing for almost 3 months. I was so happy to be reunited with Alex, and he was over the moon to get me back. I had been so lonely and unhappy sitting on that shelf all by myself. I withstood all sorts of treatment. I was loved, cuddled, held across the room, stamped and sat upon, given food and drink, read stories and watched TV with Alex, dropped in puddles and dragged through mud, hidden in devious places, stained with food and drink, and used as a confidant. As a result, I lost one eye in Ireland. Mummy and Daddy were unable to find it, and I also lost my nose. I also lost a lot of my hair as time went by, and also from being washed in the washing machine when I got too dirty. Mummy had to mend and darn me on several occasions as I gradually became more battered and beaten up. Mummy, Daddy and Alex even took me to Bamsesykehus, a teddy bear hospital, at a Christmas fair in Oslo once, and a nice doctor gave me an injection and put a plaster on my eye. After I came home from the lost property office, Mummy washed me in the washing machine, and Daddy tried to dry me quickly with the hairdryer, but unfortunately he singed some of the hair on my back. But despite all this, I'm the world's happiest Bamse because I'm much loved. I usually stay at home when Alex goes out now, so I don't get lost again. Alex's dad died from cancer when Alex was just 13 years old. The death of a parent at any age is traumatic, but the short, medium and long-term psychological impact of parental death on children in early adolescence can be devastating. I thought at the time that we were dealing with it well by talking about it and doing our best to move on, but I hadn't quite realised how deeply he had internalized his grief, and we are convinced that his deep psychological scars probably didn't help his ME, which he developed during his second year at university after having had glandular fever. During Alex's teenage years, we travelled a lot to exciting destinations such as Italy, Egypt, the Czech Republic, the Scilly Isles and Norway. It was during one of these trips, just as we were about to board an aeroplane, that I jokingly said to Alex, "Looks like our plane won't crash because they've all got their auras switched on." He was intrigued, so I told him that I always checked people's auras just before getting on a flight. I explained that a person's aura usually disappears shortly before they die, so if all the passengers had nice healthy auras, then we would probably have a safe flight. He wanted to know more, so I spent the whole of that flight teaching him how to see auras. Sitting in an aircraft cabin provides ideal, non-obtrusive conditions for looking at auras because you have lots of heads in front of you against a dark grey background. Normally, the attention required to see an aura involves a sort of defocusing of the eyes and a certain focusing of your attention, and it can be quite disturbing for the subject when they see you staring at them intently. When you are looking from behind, you avoid that problem. By the end of the flight, Alex was able to see auras better than me. In other words, he was able to see more colours extending beyond the bright, shiny sheath that surrounds the whole body. Strength in adversity. After leaving school with 4 good A-levels, Alex studied for a joint honours degree in History and Scandinavian Studies at the University of Edinburgh. During his first year, he caught glandular fever and appeared to recover during the summer holidays, but when he returned to start his second year, he started to go downhill again, and by Christmas he was so ill that he was unable to continue with his studies. He was subsequently diagnosed with myalgic encephalomyelitis, or chronic fatigue syndrome, and spent the next 18 months bedbound, followed by another couple of years housebound. ME is little understood and even ridiculed by the medical fraternity. We were completely on our own in dealing with this debilitating illness. Even family and friends were unable to understand or help. Like many sufferers, we left no stone unturned on our crusade to help Alex, and he tried a whole range of alternative therapies since allopathic medicine had nothing to offer. Slowly, after 2 to 3 years, Alex gradually started to get better. Looking back, it is difficult to say what exactly prompted his recovery, but interestingly, his improvement coincided with a radical change in his diet, as advocated by a specialist nutritionist who discovered that he was intolerant of a number of substances such as gluten, dairy products, tomatoes, and other vegetables in the nightshade family. The old adage, "you are what you eat," certainly seemed to be true in Alex's case. The chapter entitled Myalgia Encephalomyelitis contains more information about Alex's battle with ME. Following a leave of absence of 4 years from his studies, Alex returned to Edinburgh in January 2016 to complete his second year. For his third year abroad, which was part of his course, he opted to study at a small vocational college in southern Norway. The course he chose was called Photography and Backpacking, and it was exactly what he needed. No exams, just coursework, no stress, just a whole year of fun, socializing and adventure, during which he traveled to exotic places such as Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan and Georgia. It also gave him the respite and confidence he needed to complete his final academic year at Edinburgh. Alex's graduation from the University of Edinburgh with a 2:1 joint honours degree in History and Scandinavian Studies with a distinction in Oral Norwegian marked the culmination of 8 years of adversity and extreme hard work, as he struggled to cope with the debilitating effects of severe chronic ME. It was a long and often lonely journey for him, but thanks to his perseverance and good humour, a light gradually started to emerge at the end of the tunnel, and he started to regain his health. Since uni, Alex has qualified as both a personal trainer and a graphic designer. He has travelled a lot, and he has had all sorts of his own adventures. He is wise beyond his years and is enjoying life to the full. I am so proud of my son.